The best and worst times to start a strategic planning process today on the Church Revitalization Podcast.
Hello, and welcome to the Church Revitalization Podcast, brought to you by the Malphurs Group team, where each week we tackle important, actionable topics to help churches thrive. And now, here's your hosts, Scott Ball and A.J. Mathieu.
Welcome to the Church Revitalization Podcast. My name is Scott Ball. I'm joined by my friend and co-host, A.J. Mathieu.
Hey.
Okay. Hey, before we dive into today's episode, I want to remind everybody that we have the Healthy Churches Toolkit is launched and live. And you missed the special launch pricing that has gone away. However, if you go to malphursgroup.com/toolkit and you see it and you can sign up free for 7 days, there's also the ability for you to apply for a grant. We have some grants available that you can apply for to help offset the cost because we are a nonprofit ministry. And if you're outside of North America and you serve in a church overseas in any other country outside of the U.S. and Canada, you have access for free to the toolkit by going to healthychurchesglobal.com. Okay, let's dive into today's episode. This is a common question that we get. We thought we'd just tackle a common question, which is, what are the best and worst times to do a strategic planning process? And I think maybe before we dive into, because we are going to give real answers to this, like there are better times and worse times. But maybe let's start with a preface in just saying that the best time to start a strategic planning process is when you realize you need one.
That's right. Don't wait.
Yeah. Honestly, and we'll get to this here at the very end, but I'll say it here now at the top. If something's going on in your church, some real crisis or challenge, there's not usually enough of an upside to waiting till the optimal time. And like the plus side is going through the process. Like all of the advantage is going through the process. The net gain in waiting to an optimal time isn't significant enough for you to delay or risk some challenge. So I guess I do want to say that on the front end, because when we're talking about best and worst times, they really are best and worst times, but the margins, AJ, are not significant. It's not like if you do this during the worst time, it's way worse than if you were to do it during one of the best times.
Yeah, and also the truth is, you're probably already further down the road than you should have been. It's usually a case of coming to the realization, getting people on board in agreement that, yeah, we've been declining for a while. It's not like, you're super tracking data points and you've had like 3 months in a row of, looks like perhaps we're in a decline trajectory, and you start calling people for help. That is the 0.001% church. The 99 point exponent church has been in decline for a while, and it's more so a case of like, okay, some key people are in agreement on it, and we've decided to see who's out there to help us. You should call today.
Yeah, right. So the absolute best time is basically now, whenever this is that you're hearing it. But if all things being equal, if you could just, be totally objective about it and go, all right, well, what would be the best time? If we're not in a crisis, things are not terrible. We're just trying to think through, hey, we're due. It's been 5 years since we've gone through a process like this. We think we want to go through a process like this in the next year or so. When would be the best time and worst time? So that would be maybe the context in which you should take this advice, I suppose.
Yeah, I think that sounds good. So, Scott, let's kick off the best times. Hit us with the total upside.
Okay, the absolute best time, and I really do think that this is maybe number one, is the beginning of the year. For a number of reasons. One, the beginning of the calendar year is kind of the middle of the ministry year. So you're kind of in a groove already. Your programs and things are already moving forward. It's not like the beginning of the fall where it really is kind of like a fresh start. You might be implementing some new things or trying some new things. So January doesn't feel like August does. You're going back to school, but you're not going back to the beginning of the school year. So For all of those reasons, I think the beginning of the calendar year is a really good time to start because you can get all of the planning part done, which if you're going through the strategic envisioning process, that's like 3 months. You can get through the planning, all of the planning phase, and get into implementation before Easter hits. And then you still have post-Easter. And then hot take, I think being able to use the summer for certain types of implementation, doing some behind the scenes stuff, particularly at the leadership level, recruiting key teams, sets you up well to get into the fall of that year, implementing some big chunks of things. You would have had enough time to actually make some significant plans so that you could do some major rollouts in the fall of that year. So I think my number one favorite time is the beginning of the year, like January, February is maybe the best time.
Yeah,
all things being equal.
I agree, because I think two things do happen. I think you're right. The September back to school, late August, September the back to school thing feels like the beginning of the ministry year now. I don't know. I think it's kind of a more recent phenomenon, but I believe it's true. But still, the first of the year also feels like this fresh start time, like it's a new year. Yeah. We don't.
Well, usually the weather's not as good too, so people aren't.
It's okay to be inside doing some work.
Well, the sports stuff isn't. There's
That's
basketball,
but
true. You don't have as many sports to contend with.
Yeah. So, the northern states, is that hockey season for the northern states? I don't know.
I don't know what hockey is. Sorry, guys.
You can let us know in the comments. But yeah, I think it's a good mental time to beginning of the year, fresh start, and we can think about the year then in the seasons and holidays and all the things that comes with it. So yeah. Second best, then not second best. Another good start time. Late summer, early fall. You didn't already say this, did you?
No.
Okay. Yeah. So again, kind of what we were just saying. That beginning of the school year time is another sort of launch point. And so getting the timing right when people are coming back from their vacations and getting ready. They're going to be home because school's starting in a few weeks. Is a good time to go ahead and get something planned to kick off. Again, you be able to do this planning work before, winter starts, before the Thanksgiving and Christmas holiday season starts, before, you get totally buried in Advent. You can start to get your legs under you for a rhythm of implementation and, and then, be able to hit the pause button for the month of December, probably. And really kind of feel like you're when you come back in January to continue implementation, you're like, we know what's going on. We're in this enough where we feel maybe even, kind of fresh and ready to hit it again in January.
Yeah, I would still call it maybe second best for a couple of reasons. One, the beginning of the school year is always kind of more hectic than January is for the most part. But also, in reality, you'll get through all of the planning before Halloween, ideally. And then once you get into, you can do a little bit of work in November, get some stuff set up in terms of implementation. Then you're going to have 6 weeks of nothing from Thanksgiving through the holidays. Then you're really going to do your implementation in the spring, begin working on implementation in the spring, but you're probably not going to be able to roll out major new initiatives until the following fall, because you're not going to launch some major initiative in the middle of a semester. You're just not going to do that. And you wouldn't have had enough time before the spring semester starts to roll something out. So the reality is, you're probably not going to be rolling out major initiatives until the fall of the following year. So that's why I think it's second best. I guess it gives you more time for implementation, but it can feel more dragged out. But it's still a really good time, I think, and especially if you start. It just depends on when school hits for you, but end of July, beginning of August is a good time to begin, so that you've got enough runway there to hopefully start with implementation before the holidays hit.
Yeah. Pad in the time that you might expect the decision-making process in your church as well. Because we're kind of talking about you've reached the point where you're ready to hire somebody from the outside to assist you. typically for us, it's about 6 weeks or so. I mean, if a church says, hey, we're ready to get started, let's start planning dates. Building a team, getting a church ministry analysis done.
Right.
Yeah.
There's some pre-work.
Yeah, before your guide is on site. So, if you're like, it usually takes us 3 or 4 months to get all of our committees together to make decisions and all that. Pad that in back on the front end for yourselves if you are trying to maybe time out a start time.
Yeah. Yep. Good. All right, let's talk about the worst times.
Worst times, holidays. We're talking Thanksgiving, Christmas, about this time of year.
This time of year.
Yeah.
Bad time to start something. If you're in the middle of it, and it's okay. I mean, if you can wrap up by December, like if you started late in the fall and you're kind of wrapping up at the beginning of December, it's okay. That's not the worst. But starting now would be really challenging.
Yes. Now, starting with a phone call to us right now is a great time.
Yeah, give us a call. Because then you're looking at starting in January, which is the best time. Yeah.
So, this would have been a bad time to start if you called us in, September.
6 weeks ago. Yeah.
Yeah. So, but it's a great time to call or to subscribe to the Healthy Churches Toolkit at malphursgroup.com/toolkit. Great time of year for that. Any time of year is a great time for that. I'm doing some hand motions here.
It's good cross promo, AJ. I like that. Yeah, but the holidays are a bad time. So to start this again, like I'm working with a church right now. I have a meeting this weekend with them, and we have another meeting in December. It's fine, and they'll begin their implementation in January. Also fine. So it's it's maybe not like the best time, but it's not the worst. It's worked out just fine. That's maybe another reason why I just want to reemphasize again. We're talking about very small nuancy differences. Yeah. Like this is better, but this is fine. It's not the end of the process. It's not going to ruin things,
Right.
But the closer you get into the holidays, the further you get into it, the harder it is to pick dates. That's right. That's it.
Yeah. And we kind of the foundational, maybe the reasoning for a lot of this is momentum. We really we like to see you get started, and there's a series of things that when you're working with the Malphurs Group, there's a series of things that we take you through, and we just don't like to see any big gaps, and we don't like to see a lot of the team not available. So if we can kind of hit some milestone events and help you build momentum, so that you can kind of start skating ahead on your own, that's kind of the reasoning for what we're talking about here. So, okay. Another worst time of year, late spring, early summer.
Yeah. Where I would say late fall is fine. Like mid fall is fine. It's harder to pick dates, but it's really okay. You're not hurting yourself. I would almost contend that starting a process after Easter is a bad idea. It's the only one that I would say maybe don't do that if you can avoid it. Would be my opinion.
You do start running into a lot of roadblocks in the United States. Some holidays, Mother's Day, Memorial Day in June. We've got Father's Day. These are the weekends that people say, "Oh, we can't do that." We got something going on.
Not all that. Graduations.
Yeah, right. A lot of end of school
awards days, and it's awful. And then
vacations kick in.
And then vacation hits. So it's not like you have the holidays, and then that's followed by January. Yeah. So you've got time. If you start a process like this, you're going to have to contend with everything that happens. At least for me, for you all, wherever you live, it might be a different month. But for me, it's May. May is a nightmare. And then it's followed up by everyone is gone for 2 months.
Right.
It's just a very bad time to start a process. So if you have when you have to incorporate the summer into a process, but it's further down the line, it's not a problem. Like we talked about with January, it's fine. But when you start after Easter, you just never, it's like you said, AJ, it's momentum. You're never able to actually build any momentum before summer hits, and and then you're kind of starting again. This is when we get calls, in August, September, being like, can you zoom into a meeting with our implementation? We're kind of like forgetting what we decided, so this is maybe the one place where I would go, just don't. Don't start. You'd be even a bit better to start you'd be better to start a process in the summertime than to start it in the late spring, because at least if you were starting in the summertime, you would have to pick your team based on people who are already available. I guess you can envision that being okay.
Yeah.
The starting in late spring is a bad idea. Don't do it.
All right, but we've got some exceptions for you, so
Sure.
let's hit on those.
Yeah, briefly. If you are a larger church, let's say 500 plus, and so you have multiple staff, let's say 6 staff, 7 staff, something like that. And you're going to go through the strategic envisioning process, and it's going to be primarily a staff-led process. Leadership pipeline too is primarily staff-led. There's not a lot of volunteer engagement in that planning process. That's a great thing to do over the summer, by the way, or in the late spring, because of the way that implementation hits. It's totally different, and it's mainly staff-led. That's a beautiful thing to do in the spring, and then in the summer. But if you're mainly a staff-led team, you can take everything we've said and just chuck it out the window, because you can do a staff-led process any time of the year, because they have to be there. They work there. So you have that carrot and stick of you're employed here and you have work to do. So, I guess you could take the principles and apply them generally and go, this would be a better or worse time. But I'm going working with a multi-staff church on December 18th. I'm doing a staff training day. You would think that'd be the worst possible time, but it's fine. They all work there. They have to be there anyway. So,
it's a weekday. It's a weekday time.
It's
not
a weekday
time.
We're not taking up their weekend. So, So if you're a larger team with a larger church with a larger staff team, and this is a staff-led process, there really isn't a best and worst time. You can do it anytime.
Yeah.
Summer, I guess, would be the worst, because your staff then are probably taking vacations at some point.
Mm-hmm.
And you've got church camp and mission trips that take a big, long chunk of time. So that would maybe be the worst, but I don't know. For the most part, there is no good or bad time when it comes to a staff-led
it's probably
process.
narrower windows of time that are bad on a staff-led process. Yeah.
Staff-led process, forget it. Just any time's fine.
And then we kind of mentioned this in the introduction as well. If your church is really in a crisis situation, pastor transitions, which we didn't cover that in this episode. It's not necessarily related to the time, but pastor transitions is a great time to do a strategic planning process. And we've done that many, many times with really great success. So no matter what time of year, if you're in a crisis or a transition period, and
even if it's right after Easter, doesn't matter.
Yeah. Then it is totally fine. Go ahead and just pick up the phone and talk with some people about what might be the best fit for your church. But don't worry about delaying things in those types of scenarios.
Yeah, the way I would say it, AJ, is the margin of increase that you might get from getting to an optimal timing is not great enough to overcome the problem or the challenge or crisis that you're in.
Yeah.
And so if you're in a crisis, or your church is massively declining, or you're experiencing a leadership transition or something like that, there's just not enough upside to waiting.
Yeah.
You should go through a process, as soon as you can get into one. So that would be the exception to the rule.
Yep. Yeah. There you go. All right. If you are thinking about any outside help to help your church, move beyond where you are today, we would love to do that. You can get all the information about how we can help you and how to contact us at malphursgroup.com. Over there at the website is this week's article. It's at malphursgroup.com/266. So you can see that over there. You can watch the video version of the Church Revitalization podcast on our YouTube channel. Love having you guys over there with your comments, which is a great place for us to be able to interact. So you can do that too. Yes, Scott Ball?
I just want to say before we end this thing, it feels like an appropriate time to mention that we have a great team of guides that are ready and willing and able to help your church through a process. So if you say, I don't like the cut of that Scott or AJ's jib, then guess what? We're the ones who make the podcast, but we are not. AJ and I don't make 100% of the Malphurs Group team. We're just two pieces. We have a wonderful team of guides who spread out all over the world, but especially in the United States, kind of throughout the country, ready and willing to work with your church. So if you head over to malphursgroup.com, any place where you see like connect with a guy, that'll take you to a page where you can see our wonderful team and the folks who are trained and ready and willing to work with your church.
Absolutely. And if you are a Toolkit subscriber, there is online support available. We'd be glad to help you. In our Plus account, you've got unlimited coaching access to be able to get questions answered, in addition to all the training and resource content to help move your church forward. Thanks for being with us.
You have the church ministry analysis in there too. And when you take the church ministry analysis, you get connected with one of our guides who will go through that process.
Start a relationship with somebody who is on your side. Thanks for being with us. We'll see you next week.